So we're recording this now, and let's share the screen. Okay. And what, this shouldn't take too long. And so what I'm going to do, and I figured, because, a lot of times, a lot of you guys won't have a lot of questions after the reading. Some of you might have some.
Yeah.
But I'll just go through, what I was planning on doing is just, if there wasn't questions, just quickly going through at least a couple of the PowerPoints for you guys, just the basic concepts of, in this case, landslides, but, like tornadoes and hurricanes and just the different things you guys will talk about.
Okay.
So, and also, sorry, we've been sick all week too.
Oh,
So
that's
kinda
not very
congested
fun.
sounding, so, and I probably look kind of like a mess on the thing, but.
Should I start my video when you feel like you're actually talking to somebody?
Oh, it's okay. I'm used to talking to the computer. Okay, so what we'll do then, we'll just start, just the first PowerPoint that you guys went through. This is just the types of landslides. And kind of this chart right down here, if you can see my mouse, is kind of a good chart to know, just to help you understand landslides relative to, or mass movement. I call, when they say landslides on here, I'll call them mass movement or mass wasting. That's kind of what geologists call them. So landslides are these mass wasting events. So here on the far left, you've got just the rate of movement. How quickly does it move? How quickly does it fall? So you've got fast down to slow. And then kind of within that, you've got over here the type of movement. So falls, which move really fast, makes sense. Topples, slides, spreads, and then flows. Flows move the slowest. And then the kind of rock type you've got here. And then this is the more kind of important one after these ones is the soil. So you got debris and earth. So debris flows or debris falls are just mostly coarse-grained materials, where earth flows are the fine-grained. So think of like sand versus clay or like mud.
Okay. And so in ours, it said there were, I think it was mostly, I want to say debris.
Remind me of which case study you were in.
Sorry, what?
Remind me of what study you were in.
The thistle.
Yeah, so the thistle. And it said it was kind of a debris, right?
Yeah.
We could do that.
I think I read somewhere that there was a little bit of the clay too. Is it usually one or the other, or is it possible?
Oftentimes they're kind of mixed.
Oh, okay.
So, and especially thistle. Thistle was a big area. It was a pretty big landslide. And so it's going to encapsulate, they can encapsulate a lot of different things. So you can have, debris flows that, for example, I'm just going to slide down to the debris flows thing to show you. Okay. Since your question's kind of along with that. Slump. Here you go, debris flow. So debris flows, the reason it was probably classified as a debris flow, because in these, you have like big chunks like this. You see this giant rock boulder with these guys on it. But then you'll also get fine-grained stuff like silts and clays and muds coming down with it. A debris is a slurry of a whole bunch of stuff.
I guess that's a pretty good picture of what it can be, right? You got the small and it
kind of illustrates it.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one.
And so, like this, you can see all sorts of different, huge to fist-sized boulder. Well, I guess that's a head size when you really look at the guy, but right, like a whole bunch, a whole range of scales of grains. So it's kind of the same here. Okay. So that's why thistle kind of rates in there, is because it brought down a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
So, and then, it was a flow, so you can see it was slower, which if you remember from thistle, right? The thistle flow was, really slow. What was it, like 3.5, was it feet a day or an hour?
5 feet. I think it was a day.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was a day or an hour.
Because it happened within like a period of days.
Yeah, it was like a week or two, huh? Yeah. Sorry, just like my little one's going to bed. Good night, buddy. Yeah. Can you say hi? Hello. There we go. So, Um, lost my train of thought, but yeah, you can see it's a slow flow.
Yeah.
To whereas one like a good example is the Latuya Bay case study that'll be posted. I don't know if it's posted yet. I haven't checked today, but that one's a rock fall where you've got rocks falling into a glacial bay, and so then that's a very high speed thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a this chart just kind of shows all these mass wasting events in terms of speed.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. Like a fall, it's gonna go fast.
Mm-hmm.
Topple's gonna go fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. So, and if you guys have any questions at any point, just jump in and stop me. More than happy to. So this slide's a good one. It just talks about the different types of falls, or the different types of mass movement. So you've got falls, topples, slides, and then what are called lateral spread, flows, and combinations. You won't really talk about lateral spreads. Mostly what you'll see and talk about in this class and with natural disasters in general and on the news are going to be like rock falls. They're not even going to really talk about topples. Most people will consider topples and falls as the same. Then you'll get slides, and then you'll get flows. These are the kind of the ones that are the main ones. And then there's creep, which creep is what you'll see the most. You see creep all over the place in Utah, along like Salt Lake and all down through just along that Wasatch Front. Anywhere along a mountain front, you'll see a lot of creep. And we'll talk about each one of those really quickly. So there's a great slide here that shows the different types of mass wasting. So you've got rotational landslides, which I'll call a slump. And basically you can see here, it's kind of got this U-ish shape right here, bowl shape right here. And if you think about it, you can see my image on the side, it just kind of slumps. It kind of curves off like that. That's why we call it slumping. It's just kind of slumping off. Then you've got the translational slide, which is basically everything's on a plane and just slides down. Almost like a fault. It's not a fault because it's a landslide. There's no movement of a hanging wall on a footwall. It's just some earth is falling off because of angle of repose, moisture, things like that. But it's just it's sliding on a flat surface. That's a good way to think of it. Rock slides are the same thing. It's just rocks sliding off. Then you got a rock fall. That's pretty easy to understand. Rocks falling. Block slide is blocks. Rock slide is rocks coming down. It kind of has a little bit of a slump element too. Debris flows, that's just where you get a lot of times a lot of moisture up in the mountains, and it starts picking up a whole bunch of stuff. A lahar is a great example of a debris flow or debris where it's picking up liquids, picking up trees and dirt and rocks and clay and whatever it gets its hands on, it just flows down the mountain. A debris avalanche is kind of similar, except it's all kind of slumping off of an area, and it's just taking a whole side of the mountain kind of down, like an avalanche of mud, dirt, just everything. And then mud flow, it's just a kind of a big flow of mud. That's kind of simple, easy to understand. And then creep is just the side of the mountain is slowly coming down. Well, we'll show you pictures real quick, and I'm not going to talk about lateral spread. Image of rock fall. I'm not going to stop you guys. There's videos on here if you guys want to come back and look at them. But I'm not going to stop here at rock fall. I think that one's pretty easy to understand. If you saw the news and remember, I think there was one in Colorado a few weeks ago where there was that big boulder on the freeway. So just examples, images of rock fall. Here's one in Yosemite where it's just literally rocks falling down a mountain. So real simple, easy to understand. Here's an example of a rock fall going into a home. So real dangerous. That's what they are, basically big rocks falling down. Rock slides. Here you can see kind of this section of rock. You can see where it's literally broken off and just slid down, covering the side of the mountain. And it's just rock. You can see the big boulders and everything.
So is that rock in the front? What's behind? What's that?
This stuff right here?
That up further.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
This is just the underlying material. So there's, it's just what was underneath the rock. It was the plane of weakness. So it could be clay right here. It looks like it's just more rock.
Oh, okay.
There was a crack running through and it just broke off and slid down.
Just broke off. Okay.
It just probably looks different from weathering. So,
yeah.
Then here's a slump, right? And this is that one where I told you it kind of has that curving element to it, and it kind of slumps down. And I should be showing you on the slide here. It's slower than a fall, right? Relative in speed. So sorry about that. I haven't been showing you, but here's a good example of a slump. You see how it's kind of a bowl?
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of has that characteristic bowl shape, which it's hard to describe without seeing it, I feel like. So here's a blown up image of it. But yeah, it just kind of slumps down. They're actually pretty fast. Not as fast as something falling down through
Yeah.
gravity, but they happen pretty quick. And it causes some rotation or tilting of these blocks. So you can see like right here, kind of like these terraces. So they were all level, and then they just kind of slump down, but they kind of tilt like this a little bit. So they'll be tilting in towards the plane where the slip happened. And the
Is
slip,
that is that because of like moisture
yeah,
and
these typically happen with moisture.
okay.
Moisture, you can get also just layers of weakness. So if you remember in the slides, there's like clay can cause it, things like that. And then debris flows, which you talked about with
Yeah.
thistle. So here's a debris flow, and you can see it looks very different, right? It almost looks like a river of debris and mud flowing in.
Yeah.
That's why we call it a flow. They're slower, but I'm going to show you guys a video of a debris flow because I don't want you guys thinking they're kind of creep. Thistle crept really slow, but a debris flow still can move relatively fast. And this will give you an idea, like it's all relative. They still can move really fast. Can you guys see the video?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Well, that does go fast.
Yeah, you can see it's still really moving.
Yeah.
And you see these big boulders in it, and you see all this mud. A debris flow is just that big mix of materials. And this kind of gives you a good view of what a relatively fast moving debris flow looks like. And they can move significantly faster than this, and they can move significantly slower. So
it's kind of in between.
yeah, this is kind of an in-between.
Kind of
You can see just the power of all this mass wasting and movement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good example of it. Oops, I meant to hit pause. Ah, stop it. There we go. Having problems here. All right. And I'm sorry, is this I can't say the name, Kaura? It just says Kudzai, and I think is it
It's that's my middle name, Lorraine.
Okay, it's Lorraine. I've got a
Yeah.
couple of people with spouses from other places and different things. I was wondering if it was that, but it's Lorraine. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell like pictures to videos. Does it make sense? I'm sorry, Lorraine, but I am super
No, it's
glad
fine.
I
It's
feel kind of
fine.
silly too. Okay, and then, Lorraine, if you have any questions at any point, just like chime in, please. Like, more than happy
Okay.
to. And so far,
Yeah,
I hope
I don't want to be the only one.
yeah, don't feel free. Okay, so that's a debris flow. I think it kind of gives a good perspective. You can see they're really powerful. I mean, like, right, half this building fell apart because it took out the part of the foundation. So a good example, and then you can see after having seen it, now this distribution of these big blocks versus these smaller blocks makes a lot more sense in the mud.
Yeah.
As you can see it moving down. And Lorraine, I don't know if you've had a chance. Have you guys, Tammy, have you guys already posted your thistle one? I think you have, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had a chance, Lorraine, to look through the thistle case study.
Not yet. I
Okay,
haven't.
so when you look through it, you'll see, you just saw how fast that one was moving. I think it was I don't remember where the video was I think it was back in the Middle East. But the thistle landslide was significantly slower. I can't remember, but it was about 3.5, I think, feet per day.
Oh.
So huge distribution in how fast they move.
Yeah.
But relatively speaking, debris flows are, still going to be faster than a couple other things like creep, which I think the next one is creep. Well, it's still debris flow. Here's some images of debris flows coming down. Here's a debris fan. And when they say debris fan, that's just kind of the fanning out portion of the flow. And then mud flows. We'll show you the mud flow video. Maybe, if it's going to load. Here we go. Here's the video of a mud flow. And you'll notice it's all mud. Well, if we can skip the Metamucil ad. But you'll see that it's a wider combination. It doesn't have that distribution of grain sizes. And by grain size, I'm talking about you've got cobbles all the way up to big boulders. Okay. Let's skip forward. Here is mud. There's some big boulders, but you can see it's pretty much all mud coming down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that is kind of what will distinguish a mudslide from a debris flow. And you can see it can still have big boulders and stuff in it, but the debris flow was way more, there's a lot more debris in it. This was mostly just mud. And that's kind of, I know it can seem kind of hard to distinguish, but that's kind of what we're looking at is what's the majority of the material. And when it's a really good mix, then it's going to be that. Okay. Here's another great picture of a mud flow you can see. Almost looks like a river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you've got earth flows. And there's a good, I think, let's see if this takes us to a good one. There's a really great video of an earth flow.
So that said mud flow under, is it the same thing?
Yeah,
earth flow and mud flow?
They can be pretty similar. Let me go back here.
You see that up in the corner? It says earth flow and mud flow.
Under the picture.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh-huh. They're pretty similar.
Okay.
Yeah, look at here.
Dirt?
I always, here's a good way to look at it. Good night, buddy. I love you. Have a good night, okay?
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Good night.
Good night. So me personally, I don't distinguish between the two when I talk about them. So in here, it says a mass of fine grained soil. So you're talking your silts and your clays that move as a fluid. And that's, you saw the video of that. It's all kind of like a river. Where it is here, let's see, it's incohesive is what it's cohesive here. Up here it says it's incohesive. So let's look at a video and maybe that'll make it a little easier. I think it's all in the flow. Yeah, this it's all in how they flow. And you'll see with the way that this flows, it'll look very different than the mud flows. Okay, skip that. That's an earth flow.
Yeah, that doesn't really look like a river of mud.
Yeah, it's like a wall of mud. Dirt. Yeah. So this is an earth flow. A lot of times, I'll say, oh, look at this mud flow or earth flow. But I'll use them, and that's probably my bad, using them kind of interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
But when you really get down to the nitty gritty, it's in the flow type. So this one's got, a much slower, more cohesive flow, whereas one's more like a fluid, a running river.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you saw the debris flow even looked more like a running river like that.
Yeah.
So I think the video makes it a lot more clear.
Yeah, that made a big difference of telling the difference between the two.
Good. Sorry, all this. There we go. Okay. And then here's another image of it. This image right here is a great one. This earth flow in California. This is that La Conchita. This is a case study too that was this week. This is an image of that earth flow, and you can see it looks just kind of like a wall of earth that just slid down the side of the mountain. And these can
Mhm.
move really quick as well. That was a relatively slow compared to how fast La Conchita came down the side. And that was probably due to gravity, right? You saw the slope that earth flow in the video was coming down, and it was wasn't flat, but it was a lot more flat than right here you're looking at in La Conchita, where it's coming down the side of the mountain. So that has to do with, a lot of times the speed of these will also have to do with liquid content, just how much liquid is in it, and then like gravity. And then this is creep. And this is just where things are slowly, if you think about it, creeping down the mountain. This image is a good way to show how it works. So you've got thawing, drying, or cooling will cause your sediments to kind of shrink and contract in together. But then you'll get all of a sudden maybe a lot of rain, or it'll freeze, or it'll heat up. And all these things will cause it to expand. So these little arrows show it kind of goes up. As it expands, it kind of slides a little bit down the mountain. And then as it cools or as it dries out, whatever the case may be, that causes it to shrink, it'll shrink down and it'll go down. So it kind of has this up, down, stair step motion down the side of the mountain. And this is really, really slow. I guess it's a type of flow, but it's really, really slow here. So slow that you can't really see it, but you can't really like watch it happen. Like, something sliding down the mountain as if in real time with your eyes. But when you come back and look, you can see things like with these trees.
Mhm.
You're like, oh, there's creep going on, because you can see there's a different angle within the tree. You can see the trees kind of bend as it's, the bottom's moving, so the tree's slowly correcting so it stays upright. You can also see it with kind of cracks. Another way you can see it too is like fences. Fences will kind of look wonky. So a lot of times you'll see this up along, you hear it right here, it says right here, tilted fences, trees, poles, or other objects rooted in the ground. But a lot of times you'll see this up, a lot of times you'll see those neighborhoods up on benches along mountains. You'll see the creep up there a lot. So then you have cliff retreat. That's just basically the waves are coming in and the cliffs collapse back. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but here's a good example of this. You've got the waves coming in, kind of weakens the base down here, erodes it, and over time the top overburdens the base and it all collapses down. Which I think that one makes pretty good sense. If you have a question on that, just let me know.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So that's what happens on California. So yeah, well, those are the different types of landslides. Any questions on those?
No.
Okay.
No.
Great. We'll move to the next PowerPoint and just fly through this one. This one's pretty quick. So you have something, and you've probably heard me mention a little bit, something called angle of repose. Do you guys remember what angle of repose is from the reading?
Not really.
That's fine. It's really simple. It's the angle, everything, when you get a handful of sand and kind of just drop it and watch it fall and form a little pile, after a while, it'll kind of build a peak and then everything will start sloughing off the sides.
Mhm.
There's a certain angle that happens at. And that after a certain angle, a slope will become unstable and slide down. And that varies from the type of sediment and level of saturation. But in general, I say it's about 34 degrees. In general, that's kind of the rule I use. Fine sand, it's about 35 degrees. Coarse sand, it's a little higher at 40 degrees. And then your angular sand, so like pebbles and stuff, that's going to be at 45 degrees. Then when you get the saturation, that can change. But, water always changes things. But kind of in general, the rule of thumb and on the test, like when in a couple of weeks when you have the test, it would be, if there was a question of like, what is the angle of repose? I would just go with, if you see an option of 34 degrees or or something like slightly steeper than 2 to 1 gradient, that's what you'd go with.
Okay.
And this is just a really fancy showing that after about 34 degrees, it's no longer stable and stuff will start to slide off. So.
So this is kind of a dumb question, but
Mhm.
when people build on the side of a mountain, like on the side of a hill, do they have to be less than 34 degrees?
You want it to be, they can do things. A lot of times they'll try and do things to mitigate against that. And we'll talk about that here in a minute, about mitigation techniques. But yeah, you don't want to build on anything that's 34 degrees because that'll, you're at risk of
Yeah.
mass wasting. And that's not a stupid question. That's actually a really great question, especially when you're looking to buy a home in the areas like this.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of factors that can go into landslides. So with natural causes. So one is slope, which is not listed right here, but that's what all of this with angle of repose is talking about. Slope is a cause. So, you have a steep slope, and then all of a sudden you get water, a lot of water in the material. That makes the material weaker, can cause it. Earthquakes can cause it. You have a steep slope that's kind of just barely hanging on, and maybe it's water saturated or whatever, and then you get a little earthquake, a little shaking, and that's all it needs, kind of triggers a landslide. And then volcanoes, right? You guys remember lahars, lahars and earthquakes associated with volcanoes and all sorts of different things. Anytime you blow something up, you can cause a landslide. So you got slope saturation here, where your slope gets heavy rain. It kind of saturates the soils. And if you think about it, all of a sudden water gets in between all the pebbles and it kind of spaces them apart. So they're no longer like anchoring on each other. They're kind of spaced apart and can slide. That's the general idea between slope saturation. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. So that can be flooding, a different thing. You can have landslides that cause dams, which you saw in Thistle, right? Where it dammed the river. Was it the Spanish Fork River? I think it was.
Yeah.
It dammed the Spanish Fork River. Here's a great example, coming across glaciers. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on some of these things. Landslides with volcanoes. We'll talk about that, how volcanoes can cause them. So you have the Lahar Mount St. Helens right here, melted glacier. And all of a sudden, all of that melt came down, picked up all the mud, debris, and whatnot, and just came down the side of the mountain. You can also get it, which there was also a landslide at this, not just the Lahar, but also a landslide that happened at Mount St. Helens. And that's where part of the mountain just kind of slid down, sloughed off and slid down because of the instability. So there's actually two mass wasting events here. You have the Pinatubo landslide as well. Yeah?
Do lahars and landslides kind of get interchanged sometimes, or no?
Lahar is like a debris flow.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it is a type of landslide. You're right. And I said landslide. When I said there was also another landslide here, that was wrong of me to say that. There was also slumping that happened there.
Oh, okay.
So there was the landslide, the Lahar landslide, and then there was also slumping. Sorry, when I talk about Lahars, I'm always talking in the terms of a volcanic-related landslide. And then when I say landslide, I mean like gravity, things like that.
Yeah.
That was my mistake. But yes, Lahars technically are a type of landslide.
Okay.
When you teach, you realize there's a lot of things you say. They're like, yeah, it's probably not the right way.
Let me get picky, huh?
Yeah, you get picky because you guys are talking like, oh, shoot. The way I said it can lead to problems with the test. So, sorry. Thank you for the clarifying question.
No, yeah.
And then, of course, you've got human activities that cause destabilization of slopes. You see this all the time, right? Road cuts, freeways coming through here. I mean, this image right here, right? Block side, you got this beautiful road coming down that, they cut the side of the mountain because, they had to make room for this road. And all of a sudden, you change the angle of repose here, and gravity's working much harder on the material, and get a little bit extra rain, and it comes down. So yeah.
Do they have to like do something nowadays to? I mean, that's kind of like a given. You would think, oh yeah, that's gonna fall. Do they have to do something now to make sure that doesn't happen, or try to help?
They do
Stop that instead of just cutting off the side of a mountain and leaving it.
Yeah, they do. And there's a couple of slides here in a little bit we'll go over that just shows some of the things they do. This is just talking about some of the things we do that cause landslides. So we got destabilization of slopes, right here. This is like grading or excavating, removing materials for roads, like I was just talking. This could be undercutting. Another thing that we do is we will sometimes throw a lot of material on top of the slope and kind of make it heavier. And so you'll put a lot more heavier material at the top and it overweights it, and that on top of gravity kind of will cause a failure. One of the other things we can do sometimes is also change drainage patterns. So, you know, water will drain down mountains in certain ways just naturally that are not going to cause landslides, right? And the reason that is because it already caused a landslide to make natural drainage patterns to lessen slopes, you know, lessen strain on slopes and stuff. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll start throwing in canals, or we'll start, you know, we'll throw in a reservoir and we'll drain reservoirs, and that'll change the way in which the water comes off the mountains, and that can cause it. Sometimes we'll also do things where we'll have put neighborhoods in, and the neighborhood will change the way through, neighborhood will change the way that the water moves through cities with, you know, a bunch of concrete. You know, there's just lots of different things. You can also get septic tanks can cause problems with leaking septic tanks, adding more fluid constantly into the ground. So just, you know, anything that changes where the water goes can cause it. And then of course there's the traditional removal of vegetation. So fires, like that video you saw where I kind of skipped the fire part.
Yeah.
Fires will remove vegetation, because if you remember, the roots of vegetation kind of act as anchors. Yeah. So the vegetation can, us removing vegetation, whether through deforestation and land development, or through fires, like, you know, both natural and man-made, that can all cause it. You know, a lot of times you'll see farmers burn their fields, and if there's a slope there, that can cause it, because now there's no longer the grasses. So yeah, that's what it may be. So makes it pretty easy here to make it make sense. I think this is a picture of the Viant Dam, which is another case study where there was a dam that changed kind of how the water flowed through, and a landslide, it weakened the sides of the walls, and water came in, and, or not water, but if there's a landslide into the dam, which caused water to overflow the dam. You can see that right here. So that's an example of a not man-made landslide, but a landslide triggered by man, unintentionally. Then you've got, you know, they've got all this here, and I'll let you guys can come back and read through it. There's one other factor. There's some other factors that can cause it as well. So we talked about climate. You can have semi-arid climates like California that all of a sudden gets dumped on with water, like high precipitation for a few weeks or months. That can cause it. You can also have layers of weakness or tilted layers. So like a layer of weakness would be like you've got a layer of clay in there. And if you guys remember, clay kind of, you know, you get wet clay in your hands and you kind of mush it and it just kind of oozes. So it's that same principle. You've got weight on it and you've got this kind of mushy layer, and it acts almost like ball bearings, and it just slides down the mountain. Tilted layers, if you've got also like that, rather if you got a clay layer that's tilted like this, and then you've got layers on top of it tilted, you know, the gravity is just going to pull it down, and it kind of has this nice slippery ball bearing layer for everything to slide on. So you got factors within the geology of itself that can make it an area predisposed to landslides. And this is just talking about examples of layers of clay where you've got it. So right here, you've got this clay layer underneath this hill. That's what this image is showing. And then what happens is that's a plane of weakness. And let's say you get a lot of water down there all of a sudden, and then it slumps. It just kind of starts to slide down. The clay layer gets wet, starts moving. It's got all this gravity on it, and it just naturally kind of moves down. That makes sense? So and this is from the St. Jude landslide, which I honestly don't really know where that happened. It's not one I've ever really studied, but you can see that right here. That's what this is kind of showing. And then where do landslides occur? This is kind of a map showing it, and it kind of makes sense. Anywhere that's hilly, you've got hills or mountains. So the coast over here, you've got all the Cascade Mountains up here, and just a bunch of mountains, and just kind of the coastlines down here in California. Got the Rockies right through here, and there's a few little mountain ranges in here and just kind of hilly areas. And then right here you've got the Appalachian Mountains. So landslides occur where there's gradient, where there's slopes for it to happen. Okay. And I think that's all we're going to talk about on this slides. And we'll go real quick to this, which talks about landslide mitigation. So this is a really quick one. I won't spend a lot of time on here. So there's a couple of things we can do. Slope reduction. So basically we just kind of take a slope that's like this, shave it down till it's, you know, less so. We can improve the drainage of it. We can terrace things. Which is like, you know, putting rock walls. And you see this on freeways where they have like kind of a wall of rocks flat, wall of rocks flat, just kind of stair stepping up.
Yeah.
We do that. You see plants, well, we'll put a bunch of plants or like layers of plants to kind of stabilize with roots. And then what's called buttressing. And that's just putting like a heavy rock blanket or on a soft slope. We'll go through here. Here's some good examples of terracing. This is before and after. This just adds a lot of strength to it. So this is what terracing looks like. This is kind of like buttressing right here, where they put a bunch of hard, strong rocks on. They've kind of reduced the slope a little bit. All this to kind of just strengthen it.
So going back to that, I guess I look at that and I think putting, like when you talked about putting the weight on the top of the slope, I would think it would push it down.
Right.
No?
Let's see. Yeah, it kind of makes sense that way, but sometimes they've not overweighted it. I don't know if this makes sense. They put just enough weight on to hold it down, but not so much that it's going to come down the mountain. And on top of it, it's probably, and this, it's hard to see in this picture, but the angle might not be quite as steep. They might have gone through and also, and it looks like what they've done is they've lessened the angle a little bit as well. Because here it looks really steep, kind of up and downy.
Yeah.
And right here you can see where they've cut in a little bit with it. So they've probably just kind of moved this cliff off, buttressed it with a bunch of just kind of weighty rocks that are probably a little more angular to kind of interlock with each other to kind of hold it down. And that's the other thing. They're not using round rocks. They're probably going to be using more angular rocks that can kind of connect on each other and strengthen each other.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then slope stabilization using vegetation. So you got, you know, a little landslide happened here. They came back, planted a bunch of stuff, and now the roots are going to hold it. And actually one of the best things to plant for slope stabilization isn't trees, but is actually grasses. And that's because grasses often have really deep roots. And you can see they've got a couple of different types of grasses and bushes that are probably vegetation that have a deeper tap root that can go down deeper and stabilize the slope. So, and then on top of it, you can make it look nice and pretty. And then here's grading and buttressing. So here's the slope initially. They come back through and they kind of cut it off and grade it down. Basically, what they're doing is they're just kind of lessening the slope. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but.
Yeah, no, it does.
So this is another one. This is another thing that they'll do, and you'll see this. They'll come through and they'll just put like a wall of concrete along the side of the slope. So what they've done here, and it's hard to see, it looks like it might just be rock, but what they've actually done is they've come and literally sprayed, they might have put some tar across it, but then they've sprayed concrete across the top. And that'll kind of help it, strengthen it. Some other things you'll do, and I don't know if they'll have any images of it in here. No, they don't. But some other things that they'll do is they'll put fences in. There'll be these giant fences with these giant metal wires running through them, like hashing like this, kind of like this. Yeah, like making kind of like a hash all the way across. And what that's designed, it's not designed necessarily to prevent a landslide. This is in areas where there's lots of cliffs. because they can't just go through and blow the mountain out. So what they'll do is they'll put these big, it's almost like a chain link fence, but I mean, it's like wires that are, this thick around. And what they'll do is they'll catch the boulders coming down the mountains. Like nets, I guess nets, that's what. Or they'll put giant steel nets across the top. So those are some different things. And then there's just a couple other good things to know. This isn't going to be on the test, but this is just good stuff to know. Keep in mind, homeowners insurance typically doesn't cover landslide damage. So this is just some little things here. Some signs involving water, which, creep, seeping. You'll see water seeping out of your mountain, out of the hill, and things like that. So just look for things like that. Foundations kind of looking wonky. And that'll kind of help. But that's kind of the rundown. I guess it was a little longer than 30 minutes, but that's fine. And hopefully it was helpful.
Yes, no, I
Yes.
appreciate it.
It was. Thank you.
My pleasure. And what I'm planning on doing is maybe after every section from here on out where we've got new material introduced, do one of these, we'll record it, I'll go through the slides, we'll talk about it. And then next week what I'll do is I'll do a quick one. Well, next week I'll probably do this again, and we'll just do it later in the week right after the material before we go into the case studies. But
Well, I appreciate them. I learn a lot better this way. So, like I said, it made a huge difference on my test last week.
good.
So,
And usually my experience is, I actually used to do this a lot a couple semesters back, but then what I found is I would never have anyone show up. And so I'm glad you guys are coming, because it makes me want to do it more. Like I feel like they're really good for you guys.
Yeah.
I feel like my past classes, they were mandatory, so
Yeah, and that's what's funny is like,
and so you had to do it, but like I think once you get the option, it's like, nah, I could be doing something else.
yeah, and I totally get that, especially like, for you guys, it's like life is busy. I know my life's busy, and I'm not in school. So you guys that especially who are working or have families and are doing like part-time school or online school or just school in general, it's hard. You guys got a lot to do. So I understand that it can be, when it's not mandatory, it's like, I can study it later. But I'm going to keep trying to do these so you guys can have them. And like, I don't know if you were here at the beginning, Lorraine, but I'm also going to stop the recording. Give me a second.